Hello everyone, and welcome to Now You're Playing with Power, a Nintendo podcast. My name is NYPPQuestions, and this, my friends, is episode 25. We're a quarter of a way to a big old 100, and joining me in this episode, of course, my co-host, as per the usual, is Bally.
Hi, I'm NYPPQuestions. I'm still in sunny Florida, enjoying a bit of a vacation just now, as you Americans call it.
Yeah, vacation all I ever wanted, as the Rugrats cartoon did tell me back in the day. So it's it's one of those words that not is used in the common vernacular of our English ears, but
To celebrate the quarter of a century that we're on, I decided to take a vacation.
Exactly. Well, we have been doing some games and stuff in the past couple of weeks, and we're going to talk to you about them. But before we dive into that, Bally is going to tell you about what else we have coming up in the show.
As usual, we are going to talk about what we've been playing, we're going to get into some of your emails, and then for part 3, we are going to talk about gaming magazines, and in particular, an old favourite of ours that is sadly shutting down, is ending their run, and that is the British magazine, Official Nintendo Magazine.
Yes.
Used to be called NOM.
Yes, Nintendo official magazine, and then it was rebranded because their publisher changed, and there was a lot of stuff going on in that time. But it sadly has come to an end. Neither of us have been subscribed for years at this point, but they hit 114 issues, which is very admirable. And if you're going,
did you pick up that final copy for me?
I haven't actually.
Oh no!
I haven't found it in the shops. I did. I looked at Tesco.
That's a good shout, actually. I bet a lot of people are trying to pick it up.
Right, yeah, and I looked in the big Tesco right next to me, and it wasn't even there. So I'm gonna keep continuing my search. Hopefully, I'll find a final copy. But yeah, we will get into that. We'll get into gaming magazines because we have a lot to say about it. A lot to say. So we're gonna start this week as we always do. Let's not break tradition. We've done it 25 times in a row. So Bally, how about you tell us what you have been playing in Florida?
So I have been continuing the backlog, trolling through that backlog. And
it does seem to be a theme of 2014,
exactly.
Both of us just picking into the old games that we need to clear out.
And another theme of 2014, it has been an ambassador game. So I am talking about Kirby and the Amazing Mirror.
Exactly.
So I'm quite lukewarm about this game for a number of reasons.
Bally, what is this? You're supposed to love every Nintendo game. You're a complete fanboy. What is this nonsense you're telling me?
I've only ever played Canvas Curse before in terms of Kirby games, and
Yes.
I love that game. I think that's a really innovative game. It was one of the main uses of the DS hardware at the time, and I lent it to you afterwards, and we both really enjoyed it. Quite a short game.
Oh, I adore Canvas Curse. I actually beat it in that weekend. You lent it to me on the Friday, I think, and by the time it was Sunday night, I was done. I was like, wow, because, back in those times, I never beat games, like literally never beat games, and I had gone through the entire thing, and I adored it. I think it's a really interesting time when it came out, because the DS hadn't quite established itself as a platform with the sort of innovation that it's known for, looking back now. And I think that one of the tentpoles of, starting to bring those innovative titles was Canvas Curse. It was really just a breath of fresh air and justified the system entirely. So it was great.
Yeah, no, it was great, and can't wait for I keep forgetting the name of it.
Rainbow Curse.
Rainbow Curse, exactly. But let's go back to 2004.
Okay.
For Amazing Mirror, and okay, so there's a number of things that hit me the instant I played this game. The first thing is, like, Kirby feels so goddamn floaty. Like,
well,
it is just so...
What are you saying, Bally? Of course he feels floaty. He's fucking Kirby. Come on.
I had a few issues with Yoshi's Island and the way that Yoshi platforms, but I did get used to it, and in the end, I felt it worked well for the game. Kirby just, like... Okay, so he has an infinite jump.
Yes, we know this.
If you press the B button while you're in the air and holding you're actually holding air every time you jump. He fills up with air. When you
Yeah.
press the B button, he spits out that air, and it's actually like a mini projectile weapon. And then you lose all your buoyancy and sink back to the floor. Um, this is quite weird to try and get used to because you basically go up much, much, much more slowly than you come down. You rocket down the second you release that air. And it's just a weird system, and it's not helped by the fact that Kirby feels like a really, really, really big hitbox. So, and I even want to say his hitbox feels even bigger while he's inflated with air. So you're just kind of weaving between enemies at times, and it just, I don't know, it just feels weird. Um, so that was the first 5 minutes into the game. Then
Really? Wow. Okay. Bad first impression, I
yeah,
guess.
I mean, visually and musically, I think the game's great. It's sprite based. It really,
Yeah, Kirby games are always going to be colorful. They
yeah,
always have a really wonderful palette that they can draw from because it's supposed to be kid friendly and happy and clappy. So
yeah. And as a Smash Brothers fan, I know all the music. I know some of the Kirby lore, as it were.
right, of
And
course, and Sakurai being someone who used to work
yeah,
at HAL, a lot of that influence still seeks through.
yeah,
That's why in Brawl, King Dedede and Meta Knight were featured so prominently because Sakurai had worked on Kirby games in the past, and he's a big proponent of Kirby. And you see that now with the new Smashes, Kid Icarus Uprising. What do we have? Oh, three Kid Icarus characters. That's how he works. So
yeah. So Kirby doesn't feel great, and I thought, all right, it doesn't feel great. Doesn't matter. I'll just work my way through these levels and maybe it'll grow on me. But then I realized that, and like I said, I've not played many Kirby games, just Canvas Curse, and that's got very specific levels that you're at a menu and you click on the level and you get from A to B and that's the level. Like that's how it works. You come
right, it's
back
more
to
of
the
a
menu.
traditional platforming setup where you just go from 1-1 to 1-2 to 1,
Yeah.
etc., etc. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how is the structure of this game? How's it set up?
Okay, it's really simple to describe. It's like Metroid. It's like a 2D Metroid. It
Wait, what?
genuinely is. Okay, let me explain the story because that'll explain the structure of the game. The
Really,
story.
the story of a Kirby game is going to inform
Oh,
the
oh,
structure?
believe me, it's crucial to the to the
Okay, all
structure.
right, Valley,
So
I'll go along with you.
you have like the mirror world, but you're in dream world. There's basically a big problem with the mirror world, and Meta Knight, who's a good guy, goes to the mirror world to try and sort out the problem, but something happens to him. He comes back as like a dark Meta Knight and attacks Kirby. Kirby gets split into four Kirbys and then has to like find the mirror shards to regain the mirror and go into the mirror world and defeat the bad
I'm,
guy.
I'm,
Anyway,
I'm struggling to understand how this informs the structure of the game, Bally.
it informs the structure of the game because you're constantly going between the dream world and the mirror world. So you're going through multiple mirrors in order to regain all the shards. But
So,
here's the
so
thing.
wait a second. Does this work in a similar way to Link to the Past or Link Between Worlds, where you're going, from one world to the other easily between,
No, because basically one world is it's like almost like one world is a menu. So you have all these mirrors, and it's a tiny world. It's just Kirby and loads of mirrors, and each mirror takes you to a different bit of the mirror world.
right?
But the thing is that the mirror world is completely connected. So these mirrors in Dreamland just are just portals to different parts of the mirror world,
Right. Okay.
and they all link together. So you can actually play the whole game without having to come back to the mirror world, I think. Although I think you come back to it every time you get a mirror shard. But the thing that's just like Super Metroid or Metroid Fusion, the two 2D Metroids I've played, is that it's just one expansive two-dimensional world where you're getting through enemies and you're getting to corners of the world, and in the corners of the world are bosses, and it just feels like a 2D Metroid. It's really weird because you're not completing levels as such. You're going. It's like a spy. It's a complete network of two-dimensional stages that are quite like a maze often, and I got lost a lot in this game. Like I had to look at a guide a few times just to realize where I was meant to be going, and I thought like, for God's sake, this is meant to be like a kids game. What am I doing wrong? Like this is really difficult. So you you get to like these bosses, and the bosses, some of them are really, really, really easy, and others are so difficult. Like
Difficult and Kirby?
that's the thing, like the bosses, many of the bosses take up most of the screen. And your Kirby, so your hitbox is massive, and you just take so long to go up and come down. So you just feel so vulnerable. You feel like you have to be even more advanced in predicting what the boss is going, what move they're going to make to avoid them coming into you. So some of the bosses took me so many times, and the thing about gaming over in this game is that it is like Metroid. You will go back to like considerably far back before the boss and have to work your way right up to the boss again. And sometimes the boss is through quite an intricate maze, or there's a specific door you have to go through. And just trying to avoid damage on the way, exactly like you would in a Metroid game. You're just like, okay, I just need to get through these enemies, get to the boss, defeat the boss, get the mirror shard, and you're wanting to get 8 mirror shards to then get to the final boss. But the annoying thing is, in this particular corner of the mirror world, one route will lead you to the boss, and then from that original route, there'll also be other routes that lead you to these random stars that take you back to the start. I'm not even
God,
joking. They take you back to the start. But the idea of these stars is that whenever you get them, it's like the equivalent of getting an energy capsule or something in Metroid, because you do this really random little mini game where you're flying on your star, and you have to get more lives by dragging Kirby through the lives basically, and then it takes you back to the start. So the good thing is you've got more lives, but the bad thing is you're back to the start. So it's a really challenging game, and it's just quite frustrating. And it's so weird. Here's another weird thing. So you have the L and R buttons.
Yeah.
The L button at any point in the game will take you back to Dreamland, where you can go into all the mirror dimensions. So that's what you'd get with the L button. The R button, you have a little battery in the top left, and whenever you hold the R button, it calls upon the 3 other Kirbys to help you out. And I just don't understand when you're meant to use them. I was using them for the bosses, but on some bosses they just got defeated by the boss instantly, while on other bosses they basically defeated the boss for me. So it was just this weird, like,
really
and
strange.
the game never told me when I should or shouldn't use these guys, because it was just so random.
Yeah, that's strange. I'm kind of curious, like, how is the base platforming and the kind of the level progression? You know, the standard enemies you come by and all the powers. You know, there are powers in this game, right? Like a standard Kirby game, and are you using those?
Yeah, so that was an area I did like about this game, was the powers. In terms of the structure of the levels, you can do any of these bosses, excluding the final boss, because you have to unlock him with the 8 mirror shards. I'm pretty sure, and maybe not including the first boss, because he's like part of a tutorial, but other than that, I'm pretty sure that all the bosses you can do it in any order, because it's just one expansive world. It's not like a Metroid game in the sense where there's an area blocked off because you need a certain power-up to get there. Kirby can get any power-up he wants almost any time in the game. You just have to have the relevant enemy to suck up and copy their power. And I did like the enemy powers, and it was nice that you can pause the game, and when you're on the pause menu, whichever power you have, it'll give a little description of how to use that power and describe the power to you, which is quite nice. And then as you get to the end of the game, there's a specific room you can go into in the hub world where you can pick any power you like, which is quite cool. You can just like
that's useful,
float
yeah.
into it. Yeah.
Whichever your favorite, and then just roll through
exactly.
with that. Yeah.
And that's nice, because at the end of the game you can go back through all the levels and get all the collectibles to try and get 100%, which I did not bother to do, to be honest.
No, I would.
So
yes,
yeah,
that would be a good idea.
I mean, overall, I did have fun with this game. I think that I've talked so much in this last 15 minutes about all the frustrations I've had, but throughout all of that, the power-ups are fun. The bosses are well designed, even though some of them are incredibly frustrating. A lot of the bosses are incredibly easy, which is quite nice occasionally. The final boss is frustrating, but it's not overly difficult. And like I said, the game music, the graphics, they work really nicely, and the level design is good, but Kirby doesn't handle the best. So overall, I'm not loving it, but it is a good game. I'm not going to say it's not a good game because it is. It's just not massively enjoyable. I mean, it took me about 8 hours, and I mean, I probably would have had quite a lot of fun for about maybe 5 or 6 of those, but they were just a couple of hours on certain bosses and the final boss that were just really frustrating. So, go
All right.
rant over. But yeah, and I've also been playing tons of Smash 3DS, but I mean, I think I've spoken quite long enough.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Smash. Well, it's one of those things that we'll just throw in here and there whenever it's necessary to talk about. But it's going to be on our playlist for a while, and
I would
yeah,
definitely
the Miiverse
be open to more Kirby games. I'm particularly interested in what's the 3DS version called? Triple Deluxe.
Right, that looks quite
And
cool.
also,
So
but more so the Wii U version coming 2015. I'm super excited about.
excellent. All right, so from one crappy Metroid game to another, apparently, because my friends, I have taken a backlog game that has been haunting me for the past 4 years. That is
Xenoblade.
Metroid Other no, that too. It does seem that 2014 is the year of me finishing games that have haunted me for a while. It's Metroid Other M. Metroid Other M.
Twilight Princess.
Yeah, no. So I got this game launch day. I got this in September
Oh God.
2010, and I played it for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And back then I thought, yeah, this is all right. This is okay. I think the cutscenes are kind of cool. I've not really seen this sort of thing before. And then there's this period where I just put it down. I just don't go back to it. And in between that period of me putting it down and when I picked it back up again maybe in late 2011, I had played the Uncharted games. I'd played Uncharted 1 and 2, and those games are incredibly cinematic, and they have incredible voice acting and cutscenes and all that stuff. And when I went back to Other Rem, having played Uncharted and having had that experience, I just hit me like a ton of bricks. How fucking awful the storytelling is, the voice acting is, and the overall just narrative falls completely to pieces. It's terrible. It's really bad, and the voice actress for Samus is just the most monotonous. Like, her voice, it does not have any tonality to it whatsoever. It doesn't go up or down. It is a straight damn line. It's not going to be deflected by anything. Absolutely, and that's really weird for me because Samus as a character is someone who you never really get too much of an insight into. Aside from Infusion, she doesn't really say anything in the classic games. Even in Prime, she's very solitary and silent. And you kind of get the idea that she is this badass and that she is this really powerful woman. And she doesn't need to say anything because she's just gonna fucking blow you out the sky. And then they make her this emotional wreck, and I don't think it works. I don't think it works whatsoever. It doesn't really jive with anything that I have come to know Samus as, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous.
Do you think
Ridiculous.
earlier you said she sounds quite monotonous, but then you just hinted that she's quite emotional? Is she one or the other? Because I was going to suggest maybe they made her monotonous on purpose to seem less emotional, and like the classic character who is silent and you kind of don't know much about her emotions really.
Right, well that's why this game is bullshit, because she talks about being emotional and talks about Ridley killed her parents, and then there's Adam and all this stuff, and he's like a father figure, but the way that she tells the story is in the monotone voice. So it is this clash, it is this horrible clash that makes zero sense and just feels really jilted. But I don't want to dwell too much on the story and the voice acting, because that's an element a lot of people have criticized, and I am just going to back them up on that really. a lot of the problem I had with Other M are the controls. The controls are fucking dog shit, and that is like, that's not even an understatement. That is just straight up reality. You're playing the game with the Wii remote on its side, NES style, right? First of all, using a D-pad for 3D space, I don't know who decided that was a good idea. It's not a fucking good idea, especially with the Wii remote. In my opinion, I think the Wii remote's D-pad is one of the worst that Nintendo has. It actually makes my thumb like really sore playing for a long period of time. That probably explains a lot of the reason why I had such kind of short bursts of playing this game. Like I couldn't play it for more than an hour or 2 hours at a time because it literally would physically hurt me. I would be injured by the end and have like a raw mark on my thumb because of the D-pad, and it doesn't make any sense. And I do understand, like, they wanted to get this idea of you shifting perspectives because it does go from the standard third-person view to the first-person perspective by flipping the Wii remote in front of the screen. It's cool. Like, it's one of those really neat ideas, but in practice, it just falls apart. It feels like one of those things that they grasped onto and they were like, oh god, this would be really cool if we made a game based around this idea that, you can just pull out the Wii remote and get into action mode straight away. Yeah. But there are so many problems with that, Bally, you watched me play some of this game,
yes.
and you really felt the frustration that I had.
Like, the idea of swapping between the Wiimote on its side to this first-person view where you point the Wiimote at the screen and it all of a sudden becomes like a pseudo Metroid Prime kind of point and shoot style. It's just so weird. I mean, I was going to suggest that even last year at E3, Nintendo were making people play with that exact Wiimote on its side in 3D space with those kiosks for 3D World. And so many gaming journalists were just like, Nintendo, why are you giving us D-pads to control characters in 3D space? It's like, it feels like they would still be up for making a new game with that ability. Like, it's just so strange. But back to Other M, yeah, that swapping between, let alone a D-pad on its side, is just horrible. But swapping between that and that first-person Wiimote in your right-hand mode is just, horrible.
and I tell you that the problem with it is you don't have any movement control in that mode. You are stuck to the spot. Like, you don't have an analog stick to move around, and they don't let you use the D-pad. And the real issue I have is that it interferes with the tightness of the gameplay. And it's got some interesting ideas, Other M does. It has this idea that you can dodge out of the way of enemy moves by tapping the D-pad. It's called Sense Move. And you can literally spam this a lot of the time. It makes a lot of the bosses kind of easy because you just tap the D-pad a bunch and Samus will just jump out the way and not be scathed and won't be hurt whatsoever. But when you're in first-person mode, you can't fucking do that because you're rooted to the spot. So it's really frustrating when you're finding a boss and you just need to get that one opening, right? You need the opening to switch to first-person mode to lock a missile. You have to wait for the missile to load. It takes time to lock on and then fire it off. And in that time, a lot of the bosses are reacting quite quickly, so they're able to get off some projectile against you or come up close and melee you, and you can't move. You have to basically just switch all the way back and then dodge out the way, and it just becomes this clusterfuck. It becomes this mess that is horrible to handle and is just not fun. It's not fun.
Are there like good parts of this game? And I was going to suggest one perhaps would be, I know it's got some really classic bosses, obviously Ridley, but even people like, I'm pretty sure Nightmare from Metroid Fusion is in there.
Right, that was my favorite encounter, definitely.
Do those add to the game? Are those some of the positive points?
Well, I'd definitely say that visually the game's really appealing. It has this super, shiny sheen to it. It has the look that makes it feel like a much more modern game than it actually is. The Wii, as we know, didn't have the most powerful architecture behind it, but Nintendo gets around that with some style and some kind of art style stuff. And Metroid Other M definitely does that pretty well. I think it's a really nice looking game, and it has a good atmosphere and aesthetic to it. And certainly, a lot of those returning bosses, it's nice, it's really cool. But it just comes down to the main mechanical problems that you can't get over. bogged me down to the point where I didn't want to go back to the game because it was just so frustrating. There's nothing that really is satisfying about the combat because one, it's quite easy to pull off a lot of the times, and two, there's no reward. What they did with Other M is they stripped out the idea of enemies giving you health back, which is so core to the Metroid series. You know, it's part of Prime, it's part of the 2D games, that you kill enemies and then you can get their life back and you'll be able to continue onwards. There's no reason to fight enemies in this game. You're better to just run past them and get out their way, because all you're going to do is just cause yourself more hassle in the long run as your life gets drained and goes away. I think they did kind of get around that, though, because they do implement the idea of checkpointing, which means that if you die on a boss, it's not going to do the traditional Metroid thing and send you back to a save room. It's going to start you from the start of the boss again, which is really cool. I like that idea because otherwise it would just be a royal pain in the arse. And I think they had to make that compromise because they removed the energy retrieval system. So you know, that was kind of thrown in there. But yeah, it is a strange game, and it does concern me for the future of the Metroid series, because if they give Sakamoto the reins again and let him take on the story and let him, you know, have all this ultimate control over it, I'm not sure it could turn out that well. And to be perfectly honest,
And did he have full control over this one then?
well, in terms of the storytelling and all that stuff, yeah, he did. You know, Ninja, was it Ninja? Team Ninja, who helped with the game, you know, with the visuals and I think some of the design aspects. But it really was Sakamoto's baby when it came to the overall story plot points and that stuff. So I think they could definitely get back to the traditional Metroid style, which I would really appreciate, because this one just, it knocked the wind out of my sails when it comes to these games. And you know, we see so many indies doing fantastic takes on the 2D style, and you know, I'm playing a game right now, Dust and Elysian Tale, which I'll probably talk about sometime in the next episode, which does so many of those fantastic Metroid elements really well. And I would just like to see Nintendo come back to that stuff. You know, they've been gone too long from it. It's been over 10 years since the last 2D Metroid, and 4 years since the last Metroid game in general. And you know, I still adore the series, but you know, Other M is just one of those games best forgotten, I feel.
Do you think it'd be more likely that Nintendo would choose to go back to 2D than 3D? Because it has been that longer period of time.
Well, I think there was a quote, actually. There was an interview happening around E3, and the Nintendo was saying that they are exploring ways of doing Metroid both in 2D and 3D again. So, you know, some kind of happy accident could occur where we get the Metroid Fusion, Metroid Prime scenario again, where there are two games coming out on the same day. That would be incredible, right? That would be a way to please both camps. But I do think they are going back to the drawing board with it and trying to figure out what to do with it next, because man, Other M was, it bombed. It bombed hard commercially. It did terribly critically, and I remember seeing it. Like I paid a full £38 for it when it came out, and I remember at least like a month and a half after that, it was in a bargain bin, £10. It was completely off the shelves, and nowadays you can find it for like less than five. It's one of those games that not many people you know, gave a lot of credit to, because frankly, it doesn't really deserve a lot. So yeah, how's Metroid? I guess I'll just quickly check in with the other game I've been playing, which is the fifth Ace Attorney game. It is Dual Destinies, and this is on the 3DS. It popped up in a sale, and I decided, you know what? This is probably not going to get discounted anytime after, so I'm going to pick it up now, and I did. And of course, it's really interesting, this game, because it isn't available at retail at all. Capcom decided to give it an exclusive eShop debut, and they didn't release a physical copy anywhere in the West. I think it has one in Japan, but to Western audiences, that's not available. So, you know, it's downloaded onto my 3DS, so I have it wherever I go, and I'm really enjoying it. I think it is a really nice way to refine the Phoenix Wright series, and, you know, I talked about Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright earlier this year, and a lot of the similar things apply. You know, they've taken the art style and pushed it into 3D in a really nice way. The characters look much more real and sumptuous, and they just have that kind of demeanor about them, and their expressions are much more realized. It just looks really nice in general, and yeah, it's been a pleasant experience. I think what they've done is they've taken the base mechanics and just streamlined things a lot. In the past, in Phoenix Wright games, when you would go between areas, it would be very much interlinked. So, as an example, say you wanted to go to a library. This is during like the investigation part. Say you wanted to go to this library that had a murder in it. First, you'd have to go to the outside area of the library to get access to the library, and then you'd go through a bunch of menus to get there. Now they've just basically put all the locations on a list and say, you know what, you can go anywhere from anywhere, just make it easy for you, and you don't have to worry about that stuff, which is nice. You know, it's always good when they take those kind of options and streamline things. There's another really cool thing where if you have accidentally skipped past dialogue and missed it, like generally in these games you can't go back and reread the dialogue. It's done. You're all the way through and you can't go back. But there's this feature where if you tap on the bottom of the touchscreen, it will bring up a big list of all the dialogue that has happened so far, and you can scroll all the way up pretty much to like the beginning of the case that you're at and just read through. So for example, if you put the game down for a while and you can't remember what's happened, you just tap that option and you can basically just read through the conversations that have happened previously, which is great. It's a good feature, and I think that those games should just keep implementing that for some time to come, because it's really useful and makes things easier for me. So yeah, it's good. It's good, and I know that you are wanting at some point to dip into the Phoenix Wright series, Bally.
Yeah, I don't know what the best point would be to dip in. I guess I'm kind of waiting for some sort of DS Virtual Console, and then I could just get the first one. Or
you say that. Interestingly enough, the Phoenix Wright trilogy is being released on 3DS.
Oh, what?
Yeah, it's coming out in December in North America. I'm not sure if there's a European release date yet, but on one cartridge on 3DS, the entire trilogy, the first Game Boy Advance trilogy. This game has been released so many times. The original trilogy was on Game Boy Advance in Japan. It was then released on DS in the West. It was then released on WiiWare. It was then released on iOS, and now it's being re-released and remastered for 3DS. So this is like the 7th or 8th remake at this point. But
are you going to get the trilogy?
I don't think I will. I actually, thinking about it, I finished the 3rd Phoenix Wright game like at the very start of this year, and since then I have also played Layton vs. Wright, and I'm now playing Dual Destiny. So this is actually my 3rd Phoenix Wright game this year. So I'm not going to go back and pick up the trilogy because I have it quite fresh in my mind still, but I definitely think that's a cool way for you to jump in.
Yeah, perhaps. No. And Dual Destinies is the 4th game? Or
it's the 5th game.
If you count Layton versus Wright.
No, okay. So the Phoenix Wright games have a very weird history, I guess, in terms of the number of games. The 4th game is Apollo Justice, so it's a different character. It's still written by Shu Takumi, I think, who is the main guy who writes these games. But Apollo Justice is the 4th game, and then basically this 5th game, Dual Destinies, you play as Phoenix, but you also play as Apollo, and then you play as this 3rd character, Athena Sykes, and she's like, she's 18-year-old, like, lawyer in training, and she's basically the new character of the game. But so far, I've played one case as Phoenix, one case as Apollo, and I'm in the 3rd case now, which is a murder happening in a law school, and I'm playing as Athena. So they do jump things around. It's really been a lot of fun so far, and yeah, I just think that they've nailed it in the streamlining of it. But I'll probably talk a bit more about that next time once I've properly got through it, because I'll probably try and finish it for the next episode. But yeah, that pretty much sums up the stuff I've been playing this week. It has been pretty good. I've enjoyed myself, and I've also not enjoyed myself. But I am thankful that Other M is done and is out of my way. I don't have to do it anymore. So it's out. All right. Anything else you want to say, Bally, before we close the segment?
I don't think so. I think I'm going to get back into some Assassin's Creed 4 because I've been away from my Wii U, and there's an awful lot more game to play with that game, so I need to get back to that.
All right. Excellent. We look forward to some of that coming up, but we are going to take a break here, and don't go anywhere because we shall return to some more of your emails. Alright, everyone, we are back once again for the second segment of this here show, this podcast, and we're going to be talking about your emails, which you've so kindly sent to us, and you can send more of them to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now.
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com, and yeah, we've run out again. It's genuinely looking like we're going to have to do another segment next time.
If literally, if you do not send emails, then we are drowning here in the lack of them, so...
maybe that's a bad idea because now it's an incentive to not send an email so that our listeners can listen to a different segment.
Well, I don't know. No matter what, we need emails for the future regardless, so just send them in, please. Please do that. That would be appreciated. Anyway, we have some this week, so Bally, how about you get going?
So the first email. Hey MBZ and Bally, Brandon from California here. I've been playing Super Mario Galaxy 2 lately, and it got me thinking up a few Mario-themed questions for you both. First, you've commented before that the live system in platformers is outdated and needs to be abolished from all future titles. I couldn't agree more. Let's say in the next major Mario title that the live system is cut, but since the one-up mushroom is so iconic it must remain in the game. How would you repurpose this item to serve a function unrelated to lives? Secondly, it's been over 4 years since the last time I played Super Mario Galaxy 2, and although I knew it was great, I forgot just how amazing it was over this time. Super Mario 3D World was by no means a bad game, but in comparison it does come up a little short. Do you think it is possible for the team over at EAD Tokyo to surpass SMG2, and if so, any thoughts on what such a game would have to do to compete? Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I cannot agree with him more on the subject of Galaxy 2. It's one of those experiences that you will maybe never see again. You know, it's one of those game changers, and I wholeheartedly agree that, you know, Super Mario 3D World, it's not a terrible game. It's one that I didn't enjoy greatly, but it's not a terrible game, and I just don't think it holds up any sort of candle to Galaxy 2.
Bayonetta 2 has just come out, and it has received the 8th 10 out of 10 from GameSpot.
Yes.
And am I correct in saying, was it the 6th or the 7th?
The 7th, I think.
The 7th, so the last 10 out of 10 that GameSpot awarded was Super Mario Galaxy 2. And I played this game earlier this year, and I think it's one of the best games I've ever played. It's definitely my favorite 3D Mario. And for what it's trying to do, sort of that original Mario 64 format, which I would argue 3D World is slightly different to, I think that it's really, really hard to beat Galaxy 2 because like Sunshine, Flood is very different to how 64 felt, whereas Galaxy 1 and 2 are a reinvention of 64, and of that format, I think it's going to be impossible to beat.
So you do not think that the team at EAD Tokyo will be able to top it?
Here's the thing: if they reinvent it a bit, or perhaps go back to Flood, I think they can top it. But in terms of no extra stuff on Mario's back, no extra stuff like that, I think it is impossible to beat Mario Galaxy 2. I do think that if they reintroduced perhaps Flood, there are an infinite number of cool mechanics that they could add to that.
They don't have to just go back to Flood. They can just do something
exactly.
else, right? They can, you know, Luigi has his own implement with the vacuum cleaner,
Yes.
and that was a different thing. You know, they could literally do anything. They have boundless creativity. That team is unbelievable when it comes to just ideas and crazy creative stuff. So they will do something really fascinating, I'm sure. But
I agree, but that sort of pure Mario jumping by himself. I know Mario Galaxy 2 has Yoshi, so maybe it's unfair to say that it's as pure as I'm making it out to be. But in terms of that format, I do think it's impossible to beat Galaxy 2. And I think that any other extra stuff, whether it's Flood, a new item, a new power-up, or something like you suggest, like whatever they invent, I think it'll take away ever so slightly from that sort of pure platforming experience in the same way that Sunshine did.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should go back to his first question, which is really interesting
I've got a great
because
idea.
all right. Well, I mean, first I'm just gonna basically say that yeah, I would love to see the death of lives, as it the
The
irony
death
of
of
that
lives.
can't really be overstated. But as I said before, games like Super Meat Boy, even like Rayman Origins, do such fantastic work, and they never get annoying because you are never pushed back to the home screen for dying too many times. It's an endless stream, and you don't have to worry about it. But of course, as he suggests, the one-up mushroom is a very iconic thing to the Mario series. You can't just get rid of it, right? You have to have it to have some other purpose. So, what function would you give it, Bally, if you've got some idea floating around here?
I would make it a checkpoint.
Interesting. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it, yeah.
Now, the problem with that is that if you go back to something like 64 or Galaxy 1 and 2, the game doesn't really even have checkpoints. Well, it does actually. I guess certain Galaxy levels do have checkpoints, don't they? Because on some of those more linear levels where you're going between lots of very, very small planets, I think
Right.
that if you do, and they're invisible checkpoints as far as I remember. So if you die, you go back to sort of the most recent planet you're on. Whereas, yeah, why not make it checkpoints? And I guess for something like 3D World, you have the flags. I
Yeah.
don't know if they could be replaced or not, but
So,
I don't know.
would you suggest that the one-up mushrooms are distinct checkpoints that are the same every time you go through the level, or would you say that when they randomly pop up, then you would encounter one, it would create a checkpoint then and there? Or there was a thing I was thinking about, which is in relation to a game called They Bleed Pixels, which is a Super Meat Boy style game that I've been playing on PC for a long time. It's really hard, and I haven't beaten it yet, but in that game, you can create your own checkpoint when you want, essentially. I mean, you need to like collect enough whatever the collectible is, and then you can basically stand still on a platform and it will create the checkpoint then and there, and you can kind of keep it for a while and just place it where you want it. What kind of function would you
I
have?
don't think Nintendo would ever go down that route as much as it might be quite nice for them to. So I do think it would remain a fixed checkpoint. And I feel like you would reach a certain point in the level, and then the mushroom would appear and slide across the stage in some way or another, and it would still be a race against time to try and pick up that checkpoint. And hey, I guess it'd be quite interesting if there was the chance that you could miss the checkpoint and then too bad you go back to the start or something like that. I mean, the problem with using it as a checkpoint is the levels do have to remain quite linear. Or I mean, I guess maybe they don't, and maybe half the fun could be trying to find the checkpoint, and maybe that's not actually as fun as it sounds.
Maybe. But it's a really cool idea. I definitely like that. I don't really have anything else to offer myself, but I will second your checkpoint theory. And I don't think Nintendo ever will because they're a company mired in nostalgia
But
and that kind of
I
thing.
mean, I don't particularly mind the lives system in games like 3D World.
Right, and especially when they break it so much with the glitches of jumping on the turtle head and getting
Yeah,
9999, it does at some point it does become completely meaningless. So to some degree they've already done that.
I feel like they know about those glitches and they put them in the game on
Oh,
purpose.
undoubtedly
And
they're
yeah,
there purposely,
exactly.
yeah.
So, and it's a bit of a hassle. It takes like 10 minutes to go to the level, get to the specific point, try and not die, bounce on the green shell, for example. But
I
you
don't
only
think it's
have to
that
do it
hard, honestly.
once. Yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
do it once and then that's that.
I mean,
But yeah.
sometimes it can just happen by accident, like it did for me in 3D World. I
Oh,
accidentally
really?
did it. Yeah, I pulled it off, and I was like, "Well, okay, well, I'll just set the controller down for like 10 minutes."
I found it
And
quite difficult to do the first time, actually.
yeah, I found it quite difficult as well, which is why I kind of stumbled upon it. I was like, "Oh, I managed to make it happen without trying," and it's nice. It's nice and it's a cool thing. But yeah, very good question. Thank you very much for that. I guess we'll move on to the next one.
Quick question from Fernando in Brazil again. Which characters are we going to use in the new Smash Brothers? I guess this means for both Wii U and 3DS.
Hmm. Well, we've both kind of said our piece on this, but I would say in terms of our main characters, I'm definitely going to be going with Lucina all the way. I think that she is going to be my go-to character, and I do want to try some more out and try some weird ones out, but she is my number one for certain.
My number one is definitely Toon Link. I think both in terms of thematically, I love Wind Waker obviously, and on top of that, I do think he is my best character with this game in terms of how good I am at fighting with him. I'm getting good with Olimar. A really weird character I'm trying to get good with, which the whole internet seems to be like starting to think is overpowered, is Rosalina.
Yeah.
She's really fun to use if you like. I've done some cool moves with her, and I mean when you get KOs with the Luma that she projects at the other end of the stage, it is pretty satisfying.
Yeah, must
And
be.
yeah, so I'm trying to get good with her. Olimar, like I said, Fox and Mario, I'm starting to feel like I'm playing a bit less with, just because I don't know, they seem a bit simplistic
Kind of
and
bland, right, at this
yeah,
point.
what
They've
I'm
been
trying.
around in every Smash game at this point, so you got to try and
Yeah,
branch
and
out.
like I'm starting to struggle quite a lot with Mario's aerial moves because they're so His forward and back air is quite technical now, but his forward and back air are so different that he's really getting tricky to use. And like I said in the previous episode, I am enjoying Greninja as well and trying to get good with him.
All right,
There was also
cool.
PS. Oh no, that's the next email. My bad.
Okay, never mind. Well, let's get straight
I'd
onto it,
already
Valley.
scrolled down. So it's from World's Boss. What franchises would you most like to see rebooted? And of your picks, which platforms do you think they would be best suited to in the current market? Also, since you've been asking where we're all from, I'm from the UK, not as interesting as Guam, but oh well. P.S. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is a very challenging platformer that is woefully underloved. It's one of my favorite games from this year, so I'd recommend it to you guys if you get the chance to play it. Note, it's hard as balls. So I guess in response to that PS, I think I've now decided. I mean, I'm like I said before, I'm on holiday in Florida right now. But when I get back to my beloved Wii U, I think I'm going to succumb to the European sale that they're
Yeah.
doing for Donkey Kong. So I'm going to pick up Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on my hard drive. I think it's going to cost me about 30 quid in total, which isn't too bad for a game that came out like January this year, February this year.
Right, and
So
considering you're getting a Super Nintendo Classic with it as well, yeah.
exactly. I mean,
So,
I wasn't exactly planning on playing Donkey Kong Country 1 anytime soon, but
right,
it's definitely on my to-do list in the grand scheme of things. So I thought, why not?
sure, and it'll be there sitting on your
Yeah,
Wii U for when you want it. So
exactly.
anyway, franchises that we'd like to see rebooted. So when he says rebooted, I kind of imagine that he means like start from square one again and take the character and the franchise and do something interesting with it. What would
Yeah.
you like to see, Bally?
I was gonna say there's some franchises that it's just been so long since a game was made that just by making another game, gaming has come on so much that it would automatically be a reboot, such
Right?
as
Okay.
Ice Climbers, Balloon Fight, really sort of classic Nintendo
Right,
games.
so you mean along the lines of what they did with Kid Icarus, where
Yeah,
Sakurai just took it and made it completely different, but took the IP and ran with it.
yeah, and you've said great things about Kid Icarus, and he's had a
Yeah, yeah.
complete 3D character remodel, obviously, and that started with Brawl. It'd be really nice just to see something else classic reinvented and something like that done. I mean, although we're going to get
Are there any specific examples you would have from the NES days that you're thinking of?
Uh, I guess Balloon Fight was remade to some degree with
I mean, there was the Punch Out
Nintendo Land.
reboot on Wii,
That's
right?
true, yeah. More of that kind of stuff I'd really like to see. I'm struggling to think of examples.
I mean, there is that old weird game that was represented in Nintendo Land, which is Takamaro's Ninja Castle.
Yeah,
I think Nintendo could do something really cool with like a ninja style game, right? Some sort of
yeah.
stealth game. Nintendo don't really have anything that fits into that category, I don't think. A full-on stealth idea.
Or I know that like something like Excite Bike was reinvented on both the N64 and then Excite Truck later on the Wii,
Mm.
What about something cool where it went back to its two-dimensional roots? So it was like a half 2D, half 3D game or something. I don't know. Something like that would be quite cool. And customizable stages using the gamepad or something. Even though I'm not a massive fan of that kind of
Right,
thing, but
right, right.
and I
Uh,
mean, we do know that there's an Excite Bike track in the new Mario Kart DLC, so it'll be interesting to see
exactly.
what
Yeah,
that
we'll
looks like.
see how that plays out. The other one I was going to suggest is 2D Mario. I think given the current
Yeah.
state of affairs, I think that really needs a reboot. I think we need to lose the new Super franchise and just get on and do something else because it is really tired at this point. I want a new art style. I want just different ideas. I want something fresh and interesting. And 2D Mario, frankly, has not been that in the past, past decade really. So I would love to see them just go back to the drawing board and pull out something brand new when it comes to those games.
It was a weird one because I mean, New Super Mario Brothers on the DS was a reboot. There had
Right.
been like how many years between World? Because
Oh God.
that was previously the latest game, I think. Or no, it was
Right.
Yoshi's Island, I guess.
Yeah, but
Doesn't
when we're
really
talking
count.
about pure 2D Marios,
Yeah,
right? Yoshi's
it
Island's
was
a very
Super
different
Mario
game.
World. So there was this massive gap, and then we just got four new Super Mario Bros. Games in the space of like I don't
I
know,
guess 10 years or
seven,
so.
8 years,
Yeah,
yeah,
8
10 years.
years, yeah.
So it's just it was a reboot that has been rebooted, and that was great, but you can stop now,
Fucking
sort of thing.
reboot it
Like,
again, man.
reboot it again.
Yeah, definitely.
Turn it into like I don't know, Bit Trip Runner. That'd be quite cool, wouldn't it?
Oh dear, yeah,
It's like
that'd be
Mario,
crazy.
super high speed. I don't know. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, good question. Interesting stuff. So, guess we'll move on to our last email.
So this is from Klex Yoshi. Dear MBZ and Bally, Smash Run is one of my favourite things in Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. I've played more Smash Run than I have any other mode. More than online, more than local Smash, more than classic trying to beat my head against the wall doing an Intensity 9 playthrough. I love it as a single player experience. I love the dynamic of being tossed into a giant area that you are given 5 minutes to bag as much custom moves, trophies or coins to fuel Trophy Rush in classic mode. I feel that approaching Smash Run for the final event is absolutely wrong. That that worrying about winning is a secondary objective mode for me, where the primary reason one runs through it is to build up their custom fighter moves and equipment options, as well as put said custom fighters through their paces. Smash Run kinda has the quasi MOBA quality to it that I love, and it is a shame that there is no online mode, but I also feel like the competitive aspect of the mode is the afterthought. It's the joy of snowballing and seeing how much crap you can collect, then applying said crap to your favorite character after you've completed your run to see if you can do it better and get even more crap, which then trickles into other characters since some characters share equipment types. Choosing what powers will help you with the most early on so you can kick major ass in such a delight. I usually roll with level 4 spinning blades and whatever level of auto recovery I can manage to squeeze in the weight limit of the character I'm playing. At first the lack of options did bum me out, but I realised being able to adjust the amount of time in the maze is a balance thing, and being able to set what events come or not hurts that second objective of trying to prepare yourself for whatever the heck could possibly crop up at the end. Super Smash Bros. For 3DS has some real problems, such as the lack of options. Coin and Special Smash are completely omitted. You can't choose your number of stocks for Classic. All Star only has 3 difficulties. There is no way to adjust the frequency of item spawns, etc. This isn't so much a question as it is a plea. Try customizing your favorite characters in the Smash Run customize screen and then play it with your goal being getting better stuff to improve your character. Tweak them and go in again. Experience the symbiotic relationship that Sakurai has set up between the customizable fighters and Smash Run. Please set aside your expectations of it being Subspace Emissary or some great multiplayer mode aside and give Smash Run one more try. Then tell me if you're seeing where it's coming from. Always correcting Johnny Metz on how to pronounce MBZ. Collects Yoshi.
Well, that was it's quite an email,
An
and
impassioned plea for Smash Run.
Definitely, and of course, in response to our huge dismissal of the mode in the last episode, as neither of us see any merit to it whatsoever, I did, after reading this email, I went back and I decided, I'll try this out and see what I think of it. And I, I kind of get where he's coming from, but I just don't see the benefit to it. There's the end goal of it doesn't really entice me, if you know what I mean. I get that he, is the idea is to go in there, get a lot of stuff, and then recustomize your character to go in and get more stuff to recustomize. It's this back and forth to recustomize, but at the end of the day, I'm not using customized characters. I'm not adding the capes or the boots or the agility or whatever to my characters when I'm playing, because when I'm playing online, I'm playing people with standard stuff, and when I'm playing you, neither of us want to deal with that stuff because it's not really fun and it makes it unbalanced. And so it really is just the confines of the single player in which any of those equipment stuff is being used. So to be perfectly honest, it just doesn't seem like anything that's going to net me benefit in the end. I think the cool thing about Smash Run is it does allow you to get, custom outfits for your Miis, which I'm kind of getting into. Sorry, getting into throwing some clothes on my Mii and doing stuff with it there. But yeah, other than that, it's just not. It's not for me. I'll say it's not for me, and I can't really find a way to make it enjoyable. So I don't.
I mean, I've been playing Smash Run a bit, and I think at a very bog standard level, I've been enjoying it ever so slightly more than you, perhaps, NBZ. But even so, it does feel like it's verging on being a chore for me. And when it comes to customizable stuff within the game, we were talking about this the other day, NBZ, is that I really love the idea of customizable moves, but I just do not have the time or patience to start thinking about all the costumes that up your speed and reduce your attack and vice versa, or increase your defense and lower your speed or something like that. I don't want to change the genuine weight mechanics of most of the characters. I am interested in the customizable moves, and I know that some of the tournaments are starting to use those moves, and I think you can use the costumes in those tournaments as well. But it's just another thing for me to think about if I want to try out customizable stuff, I'm gonna adjust that custom move, and then the first thing I'm gonna do is do a smash match, because I don't want to play Smash Run using my customized moves. I want to play a smash against someone, like a match against someone, because that's ultimately, I always see my game time with Smash as either unlocking some cool trophies, or if it's not doing that, then I'm preparing for playing multiplayer matches with people like yourself, MBZ, because that's the most fun you can have with Smash Brothers, is the multiplayer. So I see it as like doing drills with my favorite characters, doing some modes with my favorite characters, getting better with my favorite characters. And I don't feel like the customizations you unlock from Smash Run, or using those customizations in Smash Run, is aiding my quest in beating MBZ at Smash Brothers, basically.
Right.
So what is the point? That is where I'm coming from. That is my aim with Smash Brothers, to beat MBZ, have some fun, play online, play local. Yeah. That's the best fun I'm going to have with the game.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So
you want to beat yourself as well? Good.
Yeah, I do. I'm terrible at this game, so clearly. Thank you very much, everyone, for emailing. As we have said, we do need a lot more of them, so if you would be so kind. If you've never written into the show before, now would be a great time to start. We'd love to hear from you, so send all those in to our email address, which is, Bally?
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com.
Indeed. So we're going to close out this segment, but don't go anywhere, because we shall return for the third and final part of our show, where we shall be discussing gaming magazines, the death of the official Nintendo magazine here in the UK, and many other things surrounding that. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
12 times a year. 6 great issues plus 6 free strategy guides on a hot new game. That's twice the power for still $15. Wow, call now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third and final segment of our show. And this week, some quite sad news hit us. In fact, it is the closure of one of the magazines that really defined gaming for both Bally and I back in the day. It is, of course, the official Nintendo magazine. So it is ending its print run at issue, should I say, 114. I'm in podcast mode, not in magazine mode, clearly. And that means they've been going for a really long time. If you think about it, this magazine releases once every month, so obviously there are 12 issues a year, so to have gotten to 114 issues, they've been around a very long time. I believe the O&M version of this magazine began at the launch of the Wii, so pretty much the span of a generation, a whole gaming generation, this magazine took.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we both bought issue 1 and we were kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like the new format or not, and it was very different. The magazine was different shape, the content felt quite different, and yeah, it was right in the build up to that Wii hype where it swapped from Nintendo official magazine to official Nintendo magazine.
Right, and I mean, we should, I guess, start with that, really, before we get into O&M itself. Let's talk about our sort of origins in gaming magazines. Bally, do you have a memory of the first gaming magazine you ever bought? Is there anything that sticks out to you?
I think the first one that I remember reading, enjoying, and like genuinely getting information about games from and buying games as a result of those reviews, for example, it would be GBX.
Right.
So this was the Game Boy Advance. I think it actually came out. Yeah, I guess it must have come out just as the Game Boy Advance launched, but it was under a different name during the Game Boy Color, I want to say. I can't quite remember.
I think probably, yeah, that magazines did tend to pigeonhole themselves a lot in those days. They would name themselves after systems, which would mean that when the new thing came around, well, buddy, you got to change.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. GBX, I think, it still did cover some late Game Boy Color games and stuff, but it had a major focus on the Game Boy Advance stuff, for sure.
I just remember it having a glowing review of a game that both of us liked a lot at the time, which was Spyro Season of Ice.
Right, yeah, the Spyro game on the Game Boy Advance.
Neither of us actually completed it, and it was a very hard game. Well, looking back,
it was really interesting because
easy.
It was using like an isometric perspective with kind of Donkey Kong Country style visuals, right? It was pseudo 3D.
And it also had those
GBA.
top-down shooter levels with his dragonfly pet, whose name Sparks. Sparks?
Something along those lines.
Yeah, so it was like he had his own separate levels, which were basically top-down shooter. A top-down shooter game. Yeah, it was a really great game, and GBX gave it something like 96, 97%, I want to say.
Right. It's weird and interesting to me in this day and age because a lot of internet outlets use the out of 10 review score, right? It's like a certain number out of 10. Really, in the era of our UK magazines, everyone was using percentages. Percentage was the way that they defined things, and it's the same thing, right? But it's just the way that they presented it was very different. I would always think of game reviews in the mindset of a percent as opposed to a number out of another number.
Yeah, same. And that's what NOM and O&M both did as well. It was percentages, wasn't it? So
sure. And I do remember with GBX, it was like one of the issues was the Jedi Power Battles issue that I had.
Yeah.
And, that's a game that we both really enjoyed. I remember that issue actually covered Golden Sun quite extensively and gave it a really favorable score. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of that game. And
at the time we were like, oh, that looks difficult and complicated. I don't want to buy that.
It's totally something I want to get on Virtual Console. I'm going to get to at some point. But yeah, I think that GBX really informed the early origins. So I guess moving from there into Nintendo Official Magazine, do you remember when you first started reading NOM, Bally?
Probably the build up to the DS, I guess, or yeah, about then I'd say. And it was the main source of DS hype. Like it was,
Oh,
here are
undoubtedly.
screenshots. This, I can't remember his name. Tim something. What is his name? He was like
Tim Street.
Street. Yep. And there's like,
Yeah.
I just remember a picture of him standing on stage playing Mario Kart DS with other gaming journalists. I think it was at E3, or it
It
might have
was
been
E3
Tokyo Game Show.
2004, I believe, was the unveiling of the DS.
Yeah, so they were all invited up on the stage and they were playing wirelessly um, between each other. And this was like a big deal at the time, like wireless multiplayer,
Right,
even
yeah.
locally, was incredible. It was
Of
just
course,
like,
because the link
what?
cable had been such a big deal in the Game Boy
Yeah.
days, so it was a huge change, definitely, and I think Nom really informed a lot of the news and information and hype around games at that time, and especially when the internet was in its infancy, and in terms of being able to these days they live stream E3 every year and we sit at home and watch it in crisp HD quality.
Yeah.
Back then there was no real outlet to do that, or if there was, it was very low
It
quality
was,
and hard to
and
access. So it really, the whole idea of the magazine was to get across that info and to get across the screenshots to you in a better way than I think most other internet sources could.
because at that time, for me at least, the only website I would only ever go online to read and like watch video content, and the only real website I could do that at was GameSpot, because
Right.
it was the first, if not one of the first, gaming websites, and
Yeah, I mean, GameSpot started life as videogames.com, so they
and,
were really
and it
back in the
had
day.
like these horrendous quality videos that took ages to load,
Mm.
and then like and what you'd be watching like a 2 minute gameplay video. It wasn't even like well edited or anything. It was just, here's some gameplay footage of this game that we saw at this thing, and you're like, and we would just be obsessed by it and like watch that, and then we'd get all the info to back up these very short videos from the magazines themselves. It was a very different way of consuming the media compared to what we do now.
Right, and I think that issue when they had the DS unveiling is one of those magazines that really stands out to me. I can still see it in my mind now, like the full page spread of what the original DS looked like, at least the one that was shown at E3, which never was actually released. It was the pre-clamshell design, which I personally actually really liked the E3 design of the DS and was kind of disappointed when they changed it for launch. But those images are really kind of burned into my head and made a huge impact. It was also a good source of finding out things that were happening abroad. Of course, Japan, a big center of the games industry, you couldn't really have any idea of what was going on there a lot of the time because the internet wasn't up and running in that way as it is these days. And I remember reading the column on Nintendo Official Magazine, the stuff from Japan. And very funnily enough, that column was written by one John Ricciardi, who I listen to every week these days on the 8-4 podcast. And it was this realization that I had upon listening to that podcast and kind of thinking about the name and then thinking, I've heard that somewhere before, and going back and discovering in an old Nintendo Official magazine that, yes, this is the same guy who's still in the industry, is still around. So, I guess a lot of stuff with the early days was informing, us of the people involved in games media and in the games industry as a whole. The whole start of Reggie becoming a thing was around that time with the DS as well, and he's kind of defined Nintendo up to a point here. So
Have you managed to keep a hold of these magazines? Because I certainly know that I own almost all of my magazines. They're just somewhere in my house or my garage somewhere, and like in a big box. And I really feel an urge now to just go and look back through them and read reviews, and also like you said, look up the names of who are writing these reviews and see if I recognize any of them on the
right, and
internet
see where they are
today.
nowadays.
Yeah,
It would be
exactly.
really
Like
cool.
it's really interesting.
Yeah, I do own all of them, and they similar to you are packed away somewhere. And yeah, it would be a really cool thing to go back and watch and see the evolution, I guess, of where
One
people went.
one thing I've always done, like for example, I'm in Florida right now, And throughout my whole life, my parents, myself, we're massive fans of America. We always come over to the States. I probably visit the States almost every other year on average.
Yeah, definitely you do. Yeah.
And all my time growing up, I would always try and buy Nintendo Power when I was over in the States. So I'm sure all of the American listeners know exactly about Nintendo Power. And it was really interesting just growing up comparing NOM to Nintendo Power and O&M to Nintendo Power, because it's just so, I don't, it's different in a certain way, in that Nintendo Power it felt so much less focused on the reviews. Like, all the reviews would be stacked at the back together, and it'd be like a little column and a score, and it wouldn't be like to me it didn't feel like they did these massive page multiple page reviews.
And I feel like they did that to try and sell copies of the magazines in the UK. It was like, oh, check out our 7-page review of Twilight Princess.
Exactly.
And of course, the text isn't going to cover 7 pages. There's pictures in there. There's loads of just stats and stuff and charts and everything.
I just felt like Nintendo Power was more straight to the point. And sadly as well, Nintendo Power closed last year, I believe.
It did, yeah, it did.
So and I guess this is a big part of this topic, is that just how magazines are going to get, and have already been swallowed up by the internet, and that it's basically you have to reinvent yourself or you're going to sink, basically, because there's no market anymore to buy magazines in the same way. And
right, and it's a lot of the problem is the cycle and how quick news happens and how quickly people want it these days. You just can't do that with a monthly magazine or even a weekly one, because by the time it gets to the readership, it's already old and it kind of doesn't have any impact anymore. And yeah, it is a problem across, a lot of industries at this point. Print media is dying. It is on its last legs, and in the next 10 years, I am pretty sure that a lot of even a lot of newspapers will have transitioned to online formats and won't be in a print outlet anymore.
And I feel like a hobby such as gaming, where the vast majority of its fans and users are so young and online, compared to a hobby such as, I don't know, knitting, where where I'm sure a magazine about knitting could probably still survive quite happily, because the people buying that knitting magazine will be of an age where they will use less internet. Now, obviously, I'm making stereotypes here, but that's just feels like the way it is.
Definitely. So yeah, I guess. Going on to O&M and the changes that happened there, it was a really interesting time because, NOM had such a kind of, how would you say it? Just a really casual tone. It was never self-serious, and it was never kind of straight up. There was a lot of jokes. There was lots of kind of comic style stuff going on, and the transition to O&M was kind of stark because it was a lot more proper, a lot more chic and sheen, and I guess went along with Nintendo's image as a company, really, and how they branded the Wii as this very kind of sleek product that was kind of Apple-like and with the white and everything.
So white, yeah. All the pages, there was so much white everywhere on the cover and the back page and everything.
So how did you feel when O&M showed up at your door instead of NOM, Bally?
It was pretty tough to swallow, I'll admit. It was a different shape. It was much more square rather than rectangular. So it was
much larger as well.
Yeah, it immediately didn't fit neatly with all the other stacked up I had. Yeah. So that was irritating in and of itself. The format, the layout took a while to get used to, but I mean, as it went on and as we became more mature as gamers, I feel like O&M was very guilty of very favorable scores from a lot of first-party games that were really weak. I'm trying to think of some.
I mean, the obvious example is the 92% for Red Steel on the Wii launch. Sorry, should I say? Kind of infamous at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that's not first-party, but it felt like, this game uses the Wiimote and Nunchuck in a really unique, new, interesting way. We'd better review this game highly because then it'll sell more Wii U's and Wii's. And we never fully established how official they actually meant when they said we are official Nintendo magazine.
Right, I never really. To this day, I don't know if they had the affiliation with Nintendo themselves the same way Nintendo Power did, or what the actual establishment was. But certainly, like, I know that the staff were very independent, and even to this day, they had their own podcast and everything. And I think that. I don't like to think they were influenced in any way, but I don't know. I just honestly
based
don't know.
on many of the scores, unfortunately, it feels like they were. But I can also see where you're coming from, where they are still independent and have their own podcast, etc. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what was another game? Nintendogs did incredibly well. That I wasn't so annoyed by that because at the time I really did enjoy Nintendogs and would have given it a 90-something %.
Right. Well, I mean, at the time that this was happening, neither of us were completely super aware as we are now in terms of journalistic integrity and that kind of thing, and ethics when it comes to these kind of things. We're certainly not engaged on that level with the games magazines. They just showed up at our door and we enjoyed reading them, but I do feel that O&M grew on me a lot, and I came to really enjoy the writing, and a lot of the editors were really great. One in particular, Chris Scullion, who I still follow to this day, a Scottish writer who started on O&M. It was his first gig in the industry, and he's done fantastic work. He to this day is on the CVG magazine, and I'm not sure how long that one has left in it, but he's a great guy, and it does lead into the first days of us getting onto the internet and using that more widely, because Chris had his own video series, which was his own thing, and talked about games, and
Inside Scully and Skull.
Yeah, exactly. Inside Scully and Skull. It was really a lot of fun. That was hosted on Google Video. This was before Google had bought YouTube, so very early indeed.
Another thing that we were just talking about before recording was that O&M genuinely was the place where you, as a YouTuber, NBZ, started.
Right, and
myself, actually.
It's really kind of crazy to think this, because my first kind of foray into using the internet on a regular basis was through the official Nintendo magazine forums. That's where I went to just find out some stuff and talk to people about upcoming games, and really I delved into the Pokemon side of things a lot, and Bali did as well, and our friend Ali T, who is mentioned multiple times on this podcast, we all got into the O&M forums really big time, and into the Pokemon sub forum, and that's where I got my start. That's where I learned about competitive Pokemon, and where I had my first ever battles. My first battle ever was against a guy, I'll still remember this to this day, against a guy called Diddy. It was a 3-on-3 because I hadn't got my full team together yet. But I won it with my Yanmega Boost Bug, the good old favorite. And, everything that has happened since then, and my YouTube channel, and, playing Pokemon competitively, and just growing to what it's become, and even, having this podcast as a part of it, as a splinter, all as a result of going to the O&M forums, and I owe a lot to that place. I think it was so much fun to be there, and to this day informs a lot of the stuff I do on forums in general, though there aren't many I frequent, but I like to think I've evolved and moved forward into places like NeoGAF and those sort of establishments. So yeah, it's been a real influence.
I guess you could argue this podcast would never have started without O&M.
Yes, I think that is a takeaway. I think that O&M is the forefather to all things I've done on the internet, and we can't let that go easily. So yeah, any memories of the forums you have, Bally?
I, like yourself, I spent an awful lot of time on the Pokemon forums and with a bit of competitive battling. I do remember spending time on the Zelda and Mario forums as well, and it's just looking back on it, it was often quite childish debates and stuff
Yes,
like,
of
oh,
course
your
it is.
favorite Mario game, your favorite Zelda game, why is it your favorite? And then like an infinite threads starting with new users saying, hi, I'm new to the forums. I wanted to start a thread. What's your favorite Mario game? And then
Right.
just this whole debate starting, and then that would happen.
And people
like,
jumping on each other, and it was
Yeah.
really our first introduction to hostility on the internet, right?
Yeah,
With people
exactly.
backseat modding, as they called it, and that kind of thing, and
Or you'd
people
have
coming in
to
and
go
saying,
into a separate bit of the forum and say, "Would someone make me a sig?" And you'd get like your signature across the bottom of your profile. And I remember even back then getting Toon Link from the Wind Waker as my signature. And
Yes.
someone very kindly made me one that looked nice back then.
Well, I mean, Bally, your name on the O&M forums was the Wind
The
Waker,
Wind
for
Waker,
God's sake.
yes.
So, wearing it very much on your sleeve, I'm not gonna lie. So, yeah, it was a really fun time, and I just think it was a nice compliment to the magazine because I guess as I moved further away from reading the magazine, I was spending a lot more time online, and as a result, using those forums quite a bit. And this was where things started to get in motion, and E3s were being streamed online, and there just wasn't really a reliance on print media anymore for us in terms of getting our gaming news. And I guess by the time I'd hit maybe the age of 16 or so, I was pretty much done with O&M, and I didn't need it anymore. It wasn't necessary. Do you remember when you stopped subscribing to the magazine, Bally?
It was a little bit before you, I want to say. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, I think you did stop before me.
And then, yeah, I think it was, I guess, just as I was getting into podcasting. No, it can't have. It must have been before that.
Yeah, it must have been before that. Undoubtedly.
Podcasting. I mean, listening to podcasts, not doing
Right.
podcasts.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess there was basically a gap between listening to podcasts and subscribing to O&M, where I guess I was online getting information quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, in my last few years of school, where I was quite busy and didn't really play a lot of games, mainly
Yeah.
because you spent with our school system, we spent so much time away from home where you could play games that it became really difficult to fit it in at all.
Yeah, you did
for
drop
me
off there
especially.
for a
Yeah.
couple of years. Playing many games. So
And then at university, my first few years, I played much less than I do now, but a lot more than I did at school, sort of thing. It's complicated, but yeah, definitely affected the amount I took in games media. And then I guess during university was when it just took off with listening to podcasts, and now I'm listening to hours upon hours upon hours of podcasts every week, and that is definitely where I would say I get the majority of my information from. And it's just amazing how it's come all this way from magazines, and specifically NOM and O&M and GBX and Nintendo Power, like we were talking about, and
Right.
it's just come all the way through to now podcasts, and now to this point where we do our own podcast and
I know,
hopefully
it's crazy,
inform
isn't it?
others of some of the news that's about sometimes. So that's it's
Exactly.
really cool that it's come full circle.
It really has. So it's sad though. Don't you think, Valley? It's something that was so inevitable, but you still can't help being like, oh man, that was a really special time. It was a really fun part of.
It's very
of
sad
the
because I
past.
feel, especially in those final few issues of O&M, when I thought to myself, I'm not reading this. Like, I can get this information somewhere. I definitely took it for granted. Like,
Yeah.
the pleasure of sitting. That'd be like the only time in the whole week where I would sit down on a sofa and just open something and just read it, and just
Right.
read it like front to back for like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and like genuinely just absorb information through pure reading without any screens, without any televisions turned on. And now I'm doing that quite seldom with, like, I don't know, newspapers or books, and that time of spending it taking in games media, because I feel like I'm never ever going to take in games media again via magazine format, without a screen, without something like that, or a podcast. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that I took it for granted in the last little period, and it would be really nice to go back and read some old O&Ms and just see
Sure.
what they're like.
I mean, there is kind of a luxury to it, right? It's all laid out really nicely, and there are pictures, and there's really nice artwork, and it's all well designed, and it's just in this really beautiful format. But when it boils down to the pure essence of it, it's just really not needed, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but
Yeah.
but hey, everything has to come to an end, and O&M is pretty much there. I think I'm going to very much try and pick up one of the final issues. I would love to have the final issue of O&M, and I'm going to try and get one for you as well, Bally.
That would be great.
But trying to find them is a little bit of a trouble. I'm not sure if that's to do with a lot of people knowing that it's the last issue and therefore going out and buying them up,
Yeah.
or if stores are just not being very good at even shelving them at this point. But it's something that I do want to do. So hopefully I'll be able to, and we'll be able to kind of have a bit of nostalgia by reading through that. So anyway, I think that that pretty much closes out our discussion. It's been one that we've covered pretty extensively, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed these kind of features.
Tell us
do
if
enjoy
you
doing
are
them.
an O&M reader or a Nintendo Power, and how you feel about both of them shutting down, and
Yeah, we'd love some of
how
your
it's
magazine
changed.
stories. That would be great. So you can, of course, send all that and more to our email address, which is Bally.
NYPPQuestions@gmail.com.
It is indeed. So as we said before, we'll just reiterate it. Keep sending emails in. We desperately need them. You can also help us out on our quest to destroy the iTunes charts by going over to iTunes and reviewing this very show on that service. So that would be really appreciated. We have not had an iTunes review, I believe, since like mid-July. So it's been a while. We'd like to get another one out there. So do please go ahead and do that. We would appreciate it greatly. We like getting those iTunes reviews. Anything else, Bally, that you have to say?
Not particularly. Yeah. Any
I guess we
iTunes
should plug
reviews would be
ourselves
great.
before
Plug
we go.
ourselves. Yes, always plug ourselves.
So, Bally, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Ballyman91, BALLYMAN91. That is also my name on the Miiverse, although I have been away from my Wii U as I am on holiday. I will definitely be tweeting some stuff about the next game I'm playing, which is probably going to be Link's Awakening, although I did say before it'd be Mario World, but we'll see. It probably Link's Awakening. We'll go with that.
Okay, well, I guess we can look forward to some of those Miiverse posts. I certainly will. And you can also find me on the Miiverse, Lordnbz, and at Lordnbz on Twitter. It is very easy to find me, and I recommend you do so, because I talk a lot about games and all that fun stuff. So that is going to be us for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. We have made it to 25 episodes, and I could not be happier about that. It has been really fun doing this show, and coming up on the year anniversary of us beginning it. So that's going to be some fun stuff. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it. So we will see you guys in the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
The music used in this episode was the Ridley boss theme from Metroid Other M. Copyright 2010 Nintendo.
I'm recording.
Yeah, so am I. So am I, actually. Actually just started.
Oh, this isn't the segment we're going to do in an accent, is it?
Yeah.
No.
Alright, Billy, how are you doing today? My name is Certificate in BZ, and I'm going to ask you some questions, and I hope you will respond adequately, because then be in the right place, I'd say. Alright? Come
Just
on, Billy.
clap.
Give me an accent. Give me an accent, man.
No
Come on.
way.
Come on, throw it at me. I want to hear it.
I'm
I wanna
going to
hear it.
do my moderately posh Scottish accent, which I'm very good at.
Right, go on then, pal. Get to us.
That's my standard accent.
Right, of course. Of course it is. Right, pal. Let's get the claps on the go.